Hello and welcome to the first episode of Deconstructed on MojoPlays. For those of you not in the know, Deconstructed is where we take a list that we've already done, in this case on watchmojo.com, and break it down entry by entry to see why things placed where they did. Today's list is our redux of the top 10 Star Wars games of all time, so let's take a look at that original ranking. Okay, definitely lots to talk about there. There have been a lot of Star Wars games, so let's meet our panel. With me today is Andrew and Dave.
Hi.
We are most of the Watch Mojo video game department, or what was formerly known as the Watch Mojo video game department. So yeah, but we're totally allowed to disagree with the ranking because we're on MojoPlays now, so we can blow up the Watch Mojo ranking if we want to, which I'm sure we will. Gentlemen, let's get into it.
Let's do this.
Okay, so number 10 is The Old Republic. Gentlemen, thoughts?
It's always weird putting an MMO or having to consider an MMO for a list like this because MMOs are just so different than other games.
It's weird because they're evolving. Like, you know, an MMO that comes out might suck at first. Like, Warframe's a really good example. I think Warframe started as something, it's not really an MMO, but it started as one thing, but now if you jump in, it's completely different. So The Old Republic, when we ranked this,
it came up with a very rocket launch because it was very expensive to make at the time. I think
I think it was the most expensive game ever.
Yeah, well, to develop anyways. There have been other games that have more marketing budgets, but yeah, it was so big that they actually had to convert it to a free-to-play game. I think it was like a year or so later.
Yeah.
So
but that was considered a failure.
Yeah,
that was
because
considered
at the time.
because it was very ambitious. Because yeah, it's a Star Wars game, it's an MMO, it should work.
But they tried to make like a Knights of the Old Republic game too, with like fully voiced characters.
Yeah,
and
they wanted
choices.
The idea was to bridge the gap between the sort of a BioWare RPG with lots of dialogue and cool characters, and an MMO with all the trappings.
But I think they kind of have, and that's why it can be 10.
It worked, and I mean, it's a functional Star Wars MMO. Mm-hmm. This is something we're going to keep coming back to as we go on.
It's better than Star Wars Galaxies.
It's better than Star Wars Galaxies, which, again, also had its ups and downs depending on when you joined. Mm-hmm. But one thing I want to keep bringing up is this idea that if you removed the Star Wars license, would it still be a good game? And there are a couple of games on this list where the answer is definitely no, and I think that's okay. Real quick fast, I want to hit a comment here. How did The Old Republic get on this list, and yet The Force Unleashed didn't?
The Force Unleashed sucked, that's why.
Yeah.
The Force Unleashed had a good 2 or 3 levels. The first 2 or 3 levels are great when you can use your Force powers on everything, and then they hit you with dudes who are just immune to the Force.
Exactly.
Like I said, great tech demo, not really a good game. So that's why. Mr. Do Not Reply. That's actually a pretty great YouTube name. Okay, next entry. Okay, so one thing we did when we ranked this list, it was quite a few years ago, I think it was at least 3 or 4, was there's a Star Wars game in almost every genre of game. Like as soon as a new genre comes out, they make a Star Wars game for it. And they obviously add the Star Wars license to almost everything. So we kind of felt the need to put one of every genre on the list. And I think that's where Empire of War came in, because there's a lot of real-time strategy games. Star Wars is a pretty good property when it comes to just games in general and for strategy games. So I think that's why this landed on the list.
Well, it's also because it's a really fun game. I remember I had a couple of friends that were playing
concept.
it. Yeah, I was playing with some of my friends at a LAN party one time, and we had a lot of fun with this, especially with the Galactic Conquest, where you constantly switch between the space battles and on ground. You also have a whole galaxy map to work with. So it's kind of like building up your resources and then also just blowing up your friends. And then if you're playing as the Empire, you get the Death Star, and you just move the Death Star from planet to planet and just blow up all your friends' planets. It's so satisfying.
Okay, I stand corrected.
The ground stuff kind of sucks though.
Okay, yeah, I remember we were talking about this before the show, and you were saying that one section was better than another section.
I agree. Yeah, the space sections are definitely better than the ground sections. The ground sections definitely needed a bit of work. Like you were saying before, if you were to take away the Star Wars license, would still be a good game. I'm going to say no to that. It wouldn't be a good game. But I actually think it's with the space combat, Star Wars actually helps it in that case because they're all very recognizable ships. You know their strengths and weaknesses if you're familiar with the series.
Yep.
So yeah, it's definitely a series that anyone can jump into, even if they're not much of an RTS fan.
Okay, that's cool. I mean, the ground stuff, you have to put ground stuff in because every time you make a Star Wars real-time strategy game, you have to have walkers.
Yeah.
And then the rest, whatever the rest is. But because like there's really no, I mean, and ATSTs, I guess. I'd love to talk more about LAN party fun and strategy games, but we have to move on. Let's go. I'm going to throw this accusation out much later, but I realize that it applies to this entry. I think a couple of these are just the Star Wars games that people had on their consoles at the time, and because when you're young, you don't get a huge influx of games all the time. So some of these games are remembered more fondly than their quality represents.
Right. Right. This
and
game.
I think Shadows of the Empire is that for me. Like
Not for this.
Yeah.
For Shadows?
Yeah.
No way.
This is not actually a great game.
It's
I love
not
it.
good at all.
It hasn't
sorry.
aged well, but it's still a really good game.
No. Like the thing is, like the only good thing about that game was Battle of Hoth, but it's also a bait and switch because the Battle of Hoth was things they used in their marketing material. It was the first level of the game. It's like, oh, this is so awesome, this is so cool, and then you get to the third-person shooter sections, and it's so bad. It doesn't even have an aiming reticle. The aiming is so bad in this game. The controls are so floaty. The enemy AI is ridiculous. Sometimes they get stuck in the walls. It's not a good game. I don't think it should be on the list. Sorry.
Tell us how you really feel, Dave.
I think you're wrong.
You see, I think it's very ambitious. One thing I'll give is that there's action sections. There's a speeder bike section, which is notoriously terrible.
Oh,
I
God,
won't ever defend the
that's the
speeder
No,
bike
the vehicle
section.
sections
The
are
swoop
bad.
bike section is
Yeah.
out of control. But like, yes, the Battle of Hoth, probably the best representation of the Battle of Hoth in a game.
At that time, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, at the
I mean,
time, Rogue Squadron.
Rogue Squadron has a good one?
Yeah.
That
Okay,
is a
we'll
fantastic
get to
one.
that in a bit. But I just think this was it gave a really good vertical slice of Star Wars stuff. So if you were a big Star Wars fan, there's a lot of stuff to enjoy. Again, I understand that a lot of people I had it on PC, but other people had it on N64, and there's the rose-tinted glasses of childhood. Yeah. Like when you're young, you don't know if a game is actually bad or if you're just bad at it.
It was also more the case that they tried to make the main character Han Solo, but not Han Solo.
He's totally not Han Solo.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter. I mean, okay,
Like he's a smuggler. He has a ship that looks exactly like
and
the
I think
Millennium
he's got
Falcon.
the.
But we'll
and
get
he's
to
got the
Kyle.
pistol.
We'll get to Kyle Katarn later.
not Kyle
but I
Katarn,
mean,
this is
no, but I
Dash
know, but there
Rendar.
is this is Dash Rendar, but Kyle Katarn is the same way.
Yes.
And those games are also fantastic. And like, yes, this game is flawed. But what game from that era wasn't flawed? And this game gave you a really good sense of scale of Star Wars, like when you fight an ATST.
Yes.
You know what I mean? That feels really cool.
But all you need to do is go behind him and shoot him because he can't turn around.
But I mean, what game can't you circle strafe stuff?
Yeah.
This game, actually,
Like
you
this
can't
game,
circle.
I'm not saying this game isn't flawed, but at the time it was pretty freaking impressive. They hadn't figured out like third-person games yet. This game pulled it off pretty well.
My hot take is that any game not produced by Nintendo for the N64 is actually kind of bad.
Except Rogue Squadron. And
Yeah.
this. So any non-Star Wars game, non-Nintendo.
Man, I
based
didn't
game
even
for
need
the
to say that, and I
N64
just
is
brought so much hate down on myself. Okay, let's go. So,
What do we got now?
Dark Forces.
bad. Oh, I love this game so much.
The thing about Dark Forces is, like, earlier I mentioned, like, if you take the Star Wars out of it, would it still be fun? Technically, if you took the Star Wars out of it, it would just be another Doom clone. But adding Star Wars makes it awesome.
Well, okay, it's a very good Doom clone. Man, we used to call games Doom clones. It's a very
First-person shooter.
It's a very good Doom clone, first-person shooter. But yes, adding the Star Wars kicks it up from 9 to 10.
Yeah, like
'Cause-
just the pew-pews that you recognize from the movies. They're like, there he is, set for stun, and then they try to kill you.
You're not authorized in this area.
Yeah, all of that. Those little sound bites were just so bang on.
And you fight, and you're always fighting stormtroopers, and the game gets progressively more difficult. But it gets more difficult in like just the levels get harder and the situations you're in get harder. But the enemies, unlike a Force Unleashed, where they just throw stupidly difficult enemies at you, this game like
They
stays
were difficult. They were just
consistent.
immune to the fun stuff.
Yeah.
It also kind of showed like this character being like the badass, like Kyle Katarn, obviously.
So it was Kyle Katarn, right?
This is Kyle Katarn,
And yeah, like the very first level is literally him stealing the Death Star plans.
Right.
Which,
No longer
rest in peace, mate. Sorry,
No-
but Geonoso stole your thunder.
No longer canon. Yeah, and I remember there's a line in one of the cutscenes where he's like, I should have stayed working for the Empire. And you're, like, I remember as a kid thinking like, oh, that's so badass. He's like a, not like that he's a
Like,
turn.
he's always there, like,
he's a,
should have been working for the Empire.
I love this game. There's nothing else to say.
This game is fantastic.
So much fun. We're old. We're old, guys. All right. So this, well, we've only got the cover for Super Star Wars here. It's
franchise,
This is
right?
the franchise. It's the Super Star Wars series.
Hard as balls.
Hard as balls. Yeah. I had this one on SNES, and fond memories, but also a lot of frustrating memories.
It's definitely one of those games that requires a lot of trial and error because there's so much coming at you in this game.
Yeah, and there was no, like, they added a save system in, I'm not sure, I never got to play Empire. I got to play
I think it was
Super...
Empire that they had the password system. They didn't
Yeah.
have it in Super Star Wars.
Empire's
Yeah.
the one that I played the more of the three.
Yeah.
And it had a password system?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I played all three of them. Out of the three, I definitely would say Jedi is probably the best one.
Yeah,
Like the characters are also much more varied. They definitely have a lot more abilities. Also, Leia is a badass in that game.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can, I remember the first few levels playing as Leia. It's fun. For those of you that never played it, it's like a side-scrolling platformer because everything was a side-scrolling platformer in the 90s.
Well, it's also recently been released on PS4 recently as well.
Sorry, what were you saying?
No, you were saying how like older games, you don't realize when you're a kid that the game is hard. You just think there's something wrong with you. And this was one of the first games that made me be like, no, this isn't me. This game is f***ing hard. And I would throw my controller and walk away from it. And then 10 minutes later, I'd come right back to it because it was so fun.
Oh man, like I said, I have a love-hate relationship with this game. But it's so emblematic. It was like one of the first like full trilogies of Star Wars games, and they touch upon like a lot of the different scenes and stuff. The vehicle sections were hot garbage.
Yeah, they were terrible, especially in the Return of the Jedi's last one where you're flying through the Death Star. That's so hard to look at these days.
Oh man,
because it's literally like frames that are coming like right at you, and you have so little room to see.
What's the name of that system they have on SNES? Like that makes it look like
the SFX that doesn't have it.
not the
Mode
SFX.
7.
Mode
7, yeah.
graphics.
So it looks like terrain is coming at you.
Yeah, this was so weird as how they did the trench run. It was just like these still images, like one right after the other. It was like painful to look at.
So you were saying that this game was like, okay, talking about the difficulty quick fast. Fool's Requiem, this little comment here, says Super Star Wars was difficult because it was broken and had a shitty control scheme, not because it was purposely made to be hard.
It was purposely made to
It
be
was
hard.
definitely-
And
I
it
mean-
wasn't, I don't remember the controls really being an issue.
No, me neither.
No, I don't remember the controls being an issue either. It was just games back then were hard, man. They really didn't care. They were really married to this live system. Anyway.
It's one of those series I'd like to see come back, like as like a retro tribute form, like I don't know, Super Force Awakens.
I would play the F out of that, or
Yeah.
even as like a Metroidvania game or something like that. Oh,
Super
man.
Rogue One. Super Rogue One.
Super Rogue One. Yeah, that would be
be
good.
epic, especially.
Okay, let's go. Next one. Next up is Rogue Squadron II, Rogue Leader. Before we begin, what I wanted to say was just like, I feel like we've been talking way too much about the negatives, and this is a positive list. This is a list that was actually like, these are the best.
we
and
like
we're just
these games.
We
Yeah,
do like these
we
games.
like
but
these games,
We're just
yeah.
addressing the obvious flaws. We're not oblivious to them. But not a lot of obvious flaws with Rogue Squadron 2. I was
would
so
say there
envious
is
of this game.
One.
Oh, come on.
It's the fact that it's the shortest amount of content, but it's also really fun.
Sorry, was
It's-
that shortest amount of content?
It's got like out of the three Rogue Squadron games, this one has the least amount
Okay,
of
the
content.
third one doesn't count.
Yeah, third one's terrible.
Yeah.
Third one's terrible, that's for sure. But yeah, they put this game together in only 9 months.
Oh boy.
This game is fantastic, and the content is so endlessly replayable.
It is.
What do you mean?
Like, I was never bothered by
I didn't have a
feel-
GameCube, so.
It's one of those games where the levels have multiple like objectives
Right.
that you can do, and you get medals. And normally, I don't care about a score system in games.
Right.
But you get medals depending on how well you do, and then that unlocks different ships, and eventually unlocks other missions too, like side missions where you play as like Darth Vader attacking Yavin 4.
Oh, cool.
And stuff like that. So like unlocking that stuff was really, really fun to do.
It's also a very hard game as well. Because it only had like 10 missions in the game, like I said, short amount of content, they bumped up the difficulty, so it was very challenging. So it felt very
Which is good.
rewarding when you beat each of the levels.
You have to kill 2 Death Stars in an X-Wing. They're like, go kill both of those Star Destroyers.
Oh,
Star
Star
Destroyers. Sorry, not Death Stars.
Two
You
Death
have to kill
Stars. I was
2
like, whoa,
Star
I knew they
Destroyers.
played fast and loose
you
with the cannon, but
you do destroy both Death Stars in the game.
it's true.
Oh, so you do destroy 2 Death Stars.
you-
That wasn't
Just not
a
on the
mistake.
same level.
Yeah.
Not
Yes,
on the
but
same level.
you take out 2 Star Destroyers in the same mission.
Like it has the 3 big battles. It's got Battle of Yavin, Battle of Hoth, and 2 for Battle of Endor.
How
and then-
good is the space battle of Endor when all the TIE
That
fighters...
is so
you get that
cool.
moment from the movie where all the... and you bring your scope down, and you're just like, oh my god, there's 60 TIE fighters flying towards me, and then like...
That was so awesome the first time that
I have to go
happened.
play this game.
Sit down. We got a few more entries to go. But I think, and All right, clearly you guys loved this one, and there's no YouTube comments, so clearly it wasn't very contentious one way or another.
Yeah.
So there's a good spot to end it. Okay, so number 4 is TIE Fighter. Space Sims were big. The X-Wing, TIE Fighter, this whole series was really big in the 90s. And I want to start this with a question that is prompted by a comment from Ryan A, who says, X-Wing Alliance is by far the best flight simulator. TIE Fighter was good for its time, but it can't compare to the more modern game. I still play X-Wing Alliance to this day. So, gentlemen, why TIE Fighter instead of X-Wing Alliance, which was like the most updated version thereof?
TIE Fighter lets you play as the bad guy.
Can
and
you not
that
play?
was so fun.
Now, X-Wing Alliance, it's been a very long time
Yeah,
since
but
I
X-Wing
played that.
Alliance came out afterwards.
Okay.
TIE Fighter was like at the time, because this is the second game in the series. And like playing as the bad guy was just so refreshing because it really hadn't been done yet. The Empire hadn't really been explored in video games.
Right.
Right, from their perspective. And you're straight up a bad guy. I mean, there are missions where you're fighting other Imperial like defectors and you know, or people who are trying to usurp the Emperor.
Okay.
But you're also blowing up tons of rebels.
Okay. So I got nothing. I literally got
This
nothing.
game is really good, but I think people were a bit upset about it being on the list because it's an old game.
Yeah, well, it's one of those games that definitely has not aged well over time. Or at least its visuals haven't, because you look at it, it looks very polygonal. It looks like a Star Fox game.
Okay, but this is actually one of the problems with just Star Wars games in general, or well, yeah, Star Wars games in general. It's just that if you're ranking them, there have been so many, and so many were amazing for their time that it's very hard just to pick 10 and satisfy people. I mean, such is the difficulty of working in a top 10 based industry.
It was also the game that had Admiral Thrawn make his
it's true.
interactive debut. Like he was in books beforehand, but this is where you actually
This is the first time you get to like
see him and hear him speak, and was much more badass in Star Wars Rebels now.
And hey, he survived the big culling of the expanded universe, right?
he did,
So good on you, Thrawn. You were saying it's really old. Like, you know, I'd rather be old than ignorant, or appear old than ignorant.
But it also kind of shows there is a demand for games like this. There was actually a game that was recently pitched to EA, but I think it was Double Damage is the name of the developer. EA rejected that. It looks so cool, and EA rejected that.
Yeah, but how can we monetize it?
That's probably what they asked.
All right, well, EA is going to come up in just a second, but we got one more entry to get to before that. All right, so number 3 is Jedi Outcast, Jedi Knight 2. Jedi Knight was actually Dark Forces
3, Jedi Knight 2,
Jedi Outcast. Not to be
Hashtag needs better title.
Needs better title, yeah, exactly. Okay, so if I had ranked this list alone, like the just top 10 Star Wars games, my top 10 Star Wars games, it would have been like Dark Forces, Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast. I would have just covered it with the Dark Forces series. I guess the big question here, and it's represented in a comment from Cabaret Macabre, another great name, was, no way, Jedi Academy was way better than Jedi Outcast. It had a superior story, wider variety of more streamlined controls, I'll agree with you there, and an all-round just a smoother experience. Jedi Outcast suffered from clunky controls and levels designed poorly with insufficient instruction.
Okay, first of all, they're the same game, except Jedi Academy's story is not better. It's okay, I really like Jedi Academy.
Very good game.
But the story is terrible.
No, they're like that one person who you redeem like halfway through, like Jakar, I think is the villain in this, and his like henchwoman. You like almost kill her, and you're like, but I am good, so no. And then she just comes back in the second one. She's like, yeah, I'm still bad though. Yeah, I'm the main villain. Which was literally, I guarantee they came up with that over lunch.
No, because you're the kid fighting the evil sidekick.
Yeah, it's weird. Jedi Outcast was, no, excuse me. Academy was cool because they added all the cool lightsaber stuff. You could dual sabers, like what's it called had just come out, Phantom Menace. Phantom Menace was actually 2 or 3 years earlier, but
still, the dual sabers hadn't been something
was
you
still
played.
like a thing.
And that is better.
That
the lightsaber in Jedi
absolutely.
Academy is definitely a bit better because you have the dual sabers, you have the staff, you have more moves.
But I just think Jedi Outcast was more important. Like it's
a better video game.
It was a bigger, longer game, more better beats. I love this one.
Jedi Knight was also really, really good. This one, again, is just better. Like, Jedi Knight may have done this stuff first, but this stuff did it better. And then Jedi Academy didn't do enough else better to justify this being ahead of this one.
Yeah, Jedi Knight, I feel like it was one of those games that really didn't hold up well with age at
It
the time.
really didn't. It blew everyone away because like during that year, people were playing Quake 2. And in Quake 2, the only way you interact with the world is like with your shotgun. And in this one, and all of a sudden Jedi Knight comes out and you can force pull, you can like throw your light. I don't know if you could throw your lightsaber in this one.
I don't think you could in the first Jedi Knight.
But you could force pull the gun out of dudes' hands and they'd run around like chickens with their heads cut off. That like literally blew me away. But this game really streamlined the whole thing. It's the same thing that happened to Crysis. Like the first game in the series, you have to select each individual power. And by the second game, they streamline it so like things like force jump, you don't have to select force jump. You just jump and you use the force. And also it looks better. You were saying it didn't age well, Jedi Knight 1?
Yeah, the first one is.
Oh my god, that game, there's like 4 polygons per character. Like, let's rock. Battlefront 2. Little context, we did top 10 Star Wars games back in like 2011, like when I first started to watch Mojo, and we left this off. And I think we brought Redux lists in just so we could Redux the Star Wars list and just so we could put Battlefront 2 on the list. And I will read 2 comments. I think Battlefront 2 should have been first. That's from Guns and Games 1226. And Bullpits says, Battlefront 2 should have been number 1 in my opinion. Now, Andrew, I understand you have a hot take about this entry.
Both of those people are wrong. Battlefront 2 is the original Battlefront 2,
Yes.
not 2017, which
definitely
would
not
not
that.
make that list, don't worry.
No chance, no chance.
Which wouldn't make this list. This it's not very good. It's really not. Like, it's so, like, we've been saying a bit how, like, nostalgia has sort of clouded our image of game or of previous games. And,
Absolutely.
you know, maybe we like them. But I still feel that the games we've put on the list are still good games in their own right.
Right.
We don't like them more the older they get. Whereas this game is bad.
Are you saying that it's a bad game because you feel like there's better games, or do you feel like it's a bad game and it's fundamentally broken, it's not that good?
Okay, it's not bad, it's extremely flawed.
Okay.
And I wouldn't put it at 2. I'd put it at like maybe 8, 9.
Oh.
Yeah.
You see, here's the thing. I think, you know, I mentioned earlier with Shadows of the Empire that like, because it's a game that a lot of people had on their console when they were younger, and because it was functional, it was a very functional Star Wars game, that was all it really needed. And what I'll add to that is that this was actually a very good third-person shooter that you could play co-op with your buds. Now, I was always playing on...
It was a third-person shooter you could play co-op with your buds.
Yes.
Not a very
good. Okay.
It's a third-person shooter.
Agree to
you could
disagree.
play.
But like, that's great. When you're playing console, like, the complexity of a game can scale back. Not playing console, but if you're playing with your friend on the couch, you can scale back the complexity of a game just so long as it's like fun and it works. And I think that's why this game is so fondly remembered, because it worked so, like, it just really worked.
It was really fun as well. Like,
Yeah.
I have to disagree with you.
It's
man.
fun
Sorry,
to
but-
play, but it's not a good game, and it definitely shouldn't be number 1. Like, every other game we've had on this list has been pretty much better, with the exception of maybe
only
number
reason
2,
why
which is why I put it at like 8, 9.
The only reason why I don't think it's number 1 is because of what our number 1 is.
So you think this should be number 2? You think this is the second best Star Wars game ever made?
It's a really good game.
You're an idiot.
Okay, well, I know that at least Guns and Games 1226 and Bill Pitts disagree with you, Andrew. Maybe the comments do as well. We'll only find out later. Let us know. Okay, Nick Arriaga says, it's blasphemous how all of these games are non-canon.
Hashtag HK47 for the canon. If there's
Okay.
one character I can save from the expanded universe to put canon, it's HK47.
He's on the box.
HK47 would be good, but that was millions of years or thousands of years before.
But he's a droid.
He's a droid, so he'll be fine.
Yeah,
Yes.
he can live on.
Okay, I will agree that HK47 should be canon. Kyle Katarn should not. They do weird things in these games. Anyway, we could all reminisce for years about the dumbest parts of Star Wars games. Let us know in the comments if you have some examples. But number 1, Knights of the Old Republic. Go.
That's the game that made BioWare the household name that it is.
Not Baldur's Gate 2?
Well, Baldur's Gate 2 is a great game, but it's not that sort of game that made them like a mainstream recognizable game.
No,
I'll see.
Okay.
I'm going to agree with Dave here, and I think this is what you're getting at. It kind of like the Baldur's Gate 2 is still very much an RPG's player's RPG.
Exactly.
Like if you are into RPGs, you can open Baldur's Gate and like all the menus and the camera perspective and all that stuff is fine for you. But if you're someone who likes action games or games with a little more cinematic flair,
I see what you mean.
It's bland as heck.
Yeah.
Whereas this game looks freaking great. I remember I would just love pausing the battles and watching like the cool poses all my dudes were in. Like one person's dodging a laser, another person's throwing a thermal detonator. Man, this game is great. Also, best twist ever. I mean, we've put it on several lists, but
like it's one of those things. Is like, holy crap! I'm free. I'm Space Hitler.
You're
pretty much Space Hitler.
I guess so.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Well, you're Space Hitler with amnesia.
Yeah. But we were talking about how Battlefront II, I don't think it should be as high on the list as it is, because even though it's fun, it's not a great game.
Okay.
This is a great Star Wars game and a great game. Period.
So using that theory or whatever you want to call it that I brought up earlier, if you were to suck the Star Wars property out of Battlefront 2, it wouldn't be very noteworthy. Whereas if you were to take the Star Wars out of this, it would definitely suffer, but there's still like the underlying core RPG in there.
It'd still be a
is still
really, really good
fantastic.
RPG.
Well, that's the thing. It's very borderline Star Wars as well, because it's set like tens of thousands of years before the original trilogy. So the only thing that's recognizable there are the planets and maybe some of the sound
And
effects.
the lightsabers and the
you go to the,
Jedi.
But none of the characters are from the original.
None of the characters are, but Star Wars, like...
Which is smart. I think it's a brilliant idea because they can just go nuts, essentially. You know, like it's set so far ahead that they can just go, that they can just go like completely crazy with the canon. But still, like, you know, you go to the Wookiee planet, you go to the Mon Calamari planet. I forget some of the other cool places. Oh, you go to Tatooine and fight some Tusken Raiders.
Who are exactly the same.
Who are all exactly the same. Oh, man. Oh, they haven't evolved.
That's cool in Star Wars. It's kind of this like bubble of technology.
You're not supposed to think about Star Wars too much.
No.
People, like, you shouldn't, like, if the debates around the new movie mean anything, and don't get into that in the comments, it's that, like, you're not supposed to think too much about it, man. Just go with it. Is it fun? Just go with it.
Man, this game is such a good RPG, period. If you had like a different setting, it could be a fantasy
Well, I mean,
setting. It could be a sci-fi setting. It would
I think that game is called Mass Effect.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. Like Mass Effect is pretty much Knights of the Old Republic without the Star Wars.
Yeah, and just more shooty guns.
And more shooting stuff, yeah.
Oh, one thing that I always thought was super weird about this is like when you make your character, you can specialize in swords, which as a Star Wars fan, it means that you're going to become a Jedi later and just transfer that skill into your lightsaber stuff. But it's really funny to be fighting with just a giant medieval-looking sword in the early levels.
In a Star Wars game.
Star Wars game. It's just, it looks so freaking out of place. Still cool, though.
It is cool, yeah.
I like the shiny Sith troopers. They kind of look like Captain Phasma.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, eh?
They're like Captain Phasma before Phasma.
Well, gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our countdown. There haven't been that many new great Star Wars games lately, unfortunately. Thanks a lot, EA. So there's not a lot of reason to redux this list just yet.
No, definitely not.
We do have disagreements, though. Like, if there was one I'd take off, obviously, for me, it'd be Shadows of the Empire. I'd swap that with Episode 1 Racer.
Episode
Pod
1 Racer?
Racer.
Yeah.
Pod Racer.
It was an
Interesting.
HM, I think.
What would you
it was
swap
an HM.
before we go? Any swaps?
Ooh, no, I would just move Battlefront to lower
Okay.
on the list. But I'd keep everything
I'd like
else
to
the
see
same.
the original Jedi Knight or maybe Jedi Academy, but at the same time, I understand why we made these choices. I just kind of want to go play Super Star Wars now. So on that note, thank you for joining us for Deconstructed. I'm going to give a big thanks to Andrew and Dave. Almost confused them there. And thank you, our viewers. Let us know what other Watch Mojo topics you'd like to see us deconstruct here on MojoPlays. We can just rip them apart, so no holds barred. Say thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
you.
Thanks for watching MojoPlays. Be sure to subscribe and click on the link in the description below to check out our suggestion page and vote on what content you'd like to see us cover next.